Hello and welcome to part 2 of building a balsa model aircraft. In this case it's the excellent David Boddington Cirrus Moth. I'm saying excellent because I'm very impressed with how the kit's gone together so far, and also the quality of the wood is really spot on. So I've made one side which I've removed, and you can see that I've actually located the formers while it was pinned down so I could ensure they were at right angles. I'm very pleased with that. It's come out really solid. Then there's a slight quandary because there's only one profile shown, and I've decided to make the rear part on the plan as is, and once that's set, which should be now, I'm going to lift it off, turn it round and glue it onto this preformed front section. I could have done it another way. I could have just flipped the plan over, and you can normally see through it. You can trace through and make the lines a bit more prominent. You can even, if you're not too worried about damaging the plan, rub it over with some oil and that'll make it very transparent and you can see it. You could even photocopy it and put it in reverse if you were really particular, but this I think will do the job. So if I lift this now, and we can flip it round, and hopefully everything will work out fine. You need a little bit of care because it's a handed side. This has to be flush on this side, and when I was making it the other way, the other side, that had to be pushed down in between the frames. So you have to be careful with things like that. I'm sure this will have attached itself to the cling film, hence the name, I suppose. Is that going to come out? That's how it took some doing. Right, here we go. Sure enough. Oh no, it's not too bad. Little bit here at the back. That'll come off. There you go. So that side's done. I'll flip this over. I'll have to put some fresh cling film down. Should. There we go. Joins nicely. So what I'll do is I'll put a bit of cling film down, pin it down, put this last diagonal in, leave it to set for a couple of hours, and then we'll be ready to put the two sides together, and that gets a little bit more interesting. I think I've just made an executive decision. While this side's pinned down, I'm going to add this side to it and glue these 3 points in because they're square at right angles. While it's held nice and firm, I think I'll get a nice joint. So let's crack on. I need glue along this edge. Here. And I need glue in here. I'll smear that in, and I need it in there. I think that's it. Let's just pause. I'll get a brush so I can brush that in properly. There we go. Nice application without any excess, really, is what I'm looking for. Some of that can be removed. And I'm going to use weights, I think, to hold this in position. So that'll do. There. Correct there. Nice fillet of glue there. And and I'll put a pin in to hold that in position. Yeah, making a look at that. Yes, there we go. Might as well take advantage while it's pinned down. When that's set, I'll lift it off the board and we'll change the board I'm going to use. So I'll explain why then. We're ready for the next stage now, and as you can see, the fuselage sides have been joined together. I clamped them here. I'd already weighed them down for this section. There are a few little jobs before I start using this jigging board. More about that later, but the first thing that I've noticed is that the tank doesn't quite fit through the gap, so I'm going to have to open this out a little because it will have to be fed in from this direction. So that's the first little job. Another job that I've noted, these are supports that go on the inside on both sides, and the plan calls for a cutout for bearers to mount the servos. Now it strikes me that that's a mistake to decide that at this stage. You can use the weight of 2, perhaps 3 servos if we include a throttle servo on a rail here to actually help adjust the CG position, and I prefer to do that by mounting the servos on a rail that I can move back and forth until I hit the desired point without adding any dead weight, or as little dead weight as possible. So I'm going to glue those in, or these in, without the bracket cutouts as shown on the plan, and they'll be clamped in there. And then we'll get back to how I'm going to use this jig. So the first job is to open this out so that the tank fits in. As I hope you can see, this tank can now slide in to place. I'm quite happy with that. I had to take a little bit off the frame and a little bit off the bearers, but the tank can now fit in. I might need to open up a hole here so that the fuel line can go through unhindered, but I'm happy with that. So we'll take that out and put it to one side. Let's pay our attention to the jig now. Now, until recently, all the models I'd ever built in my life, I hadn't used a jig like this. Sometimes that was very awkward. I was gifted this quite recently, and I've used it on at least the last 2 builds. Perhaps this is the 3rd one, I'm not sure. But what a game changer it can be in terms of being secure in the knowledge that the fuselage is going together and it's square and it's not bowed or twisted in any way. First thing I'd always do, or I've started to do, is I've marked on the centre line of the formers. This one's fairly self-evident because it's glued together in 2 halves, and I'm going to use that as a guide when it comes to setting this up on the jig. So the first thing to do, well actually I've just noticed another one I should do. If I mark that one it'll make it easier. So I know it's 47.5 mil to the centre section, so I'll mark that on. This just aids when you're setting up the jig. Just bear with me, sorry about this. There we go. So you select a centre line on the jig and line this up on that jig and making sure you've got enough length. Yeah, happy with that. Centre line. Centre line, so that's central, and then I'm going to set up this jig. There are retaining nuts and bolts used to hold it in position. There are T-nuts held in place here, There are all kinds of variations on this available, I know. This is a very low-tech one, but it works and it makes a big difference. So I'm just gently setting it up at the moment. I'm not trying to get it bang on because there'll be a little bit of shuffling involved. And I'll adjust that. And I'll carry on setting this up. Once it's set up, I'll tell you where we'll go from there. This is the model now in the jig. It's set up. I've lined it up with the centre section, the centre line. I've also dry fitted, I haven't actually glued this in yet. I've dry fitted this component here which pulls the rear in and the former, and by going over the top of it I'm able to line it up with the centre line. That's what gives you the view that I'm seeing, and that keeps it all nice and square without it going off on a banana tangent. I've also, you'll probably see here, clamped those two strengtheners that were supposed to hold the bearers for the servos, and I've already explained why I'm not installing them yet, but I'm using these clothes pegs for a clothesline, old-fashioned design. I use these a lot when I was building model boats because they produce a nice convenient clamp that's not too brutal, and with a little bit of ingenuity you can turn them round the spring and set them up like this, and then you can get a longer reach to clamp components and hold them in position. It's just something I've done for quite a while now in other types of modelling. Really handy. Everything's set up, it's dry fitted. I'm happy that they're square. The next thing I need to do is to glue in these cross pieces, and I'll double check them. Excuse me for knocking that there. I'll double check them with the plan, and I'll cut them in pairs so that they're identical before they're glued together. And when I'm gluing this, I will use super glue to zap them, because I want an instant. Once I'm happy with it, I don't want to be trying to pin it to hold it. Although I can, if I wish to, just add some extra clamps to hold them in. Another thing I've found useful when using these clamps is to actually put a light rubber band across the top, and that helps hold these and secure everything in place. I'll crack on with that, and then we'll come back once the two sides are totally glued together with the recommended taper in place. I hope you can see here I've actually glued these cross pieces in, but it's very difficult to get to the underside. So what I will do is I'll lift things out of the clamp, out of the jig, and flip them over, and I've already cut these to match, and I'll glue these in position on the lower side before I return everything back to the jig. So far everything's going smoothly. Let's hope it carries on. As you can see, I've flipped the fuselage over. I've added the matching cross pieces in place. I'm holding this one because there's a little bit more strain on it. And what I will do is add a small gusset in between the side of the frame and these cross pieces, which will add minimum weight but an enormous amount of strength. I hope you can see here the strengthening gussets have been added. A small amount of balsa for a big increase in strength, I think. And what I'm going to do now is add the formers which provide the support for the turtle deck. So if we zoom so you can see it, these are placed in front of these formers, so I'll put them in position. I'm going to zap them with some super glue. And that's the massive advantage, of course, with CA glue. And the final one. Now I suspect that these are going to need to be sanded down a touch because there doesn't appear to be enough allowed for the thickness of the material to cover this, but we can sort that, it's not a big deal. I'll zoom out, we can see now that we've basically got the making of a fuselage. I have a wedge to add here and two more formers here, and then I'm going to call this video done. So I'll get those completed and then we'll come back to finish this part off. Here we go then, the last part of this build video, for this section at least. I'm gluing this former in. I've checked that the tank still fits through, and now it's just a case of fitting in these parts. And ensuring that the square, which I think I'm just about managing to do, yep, happy with that. And the final one, there we have it, folks. I hope you've enjoyed this video so far. This is number 2 in the fuselage build, and we now have the basic skeleton of the fuselage completed. In the next video I'll be adding some of the internal parts, and we look at how the turtle deck's to be produced and the cowl area and so on. So if you've enjoyed that, please give it the thumbs up. If you haven't already done so, consider subscribing, and then you'll see the rest of the build along with some other modelling adventures. Thanks for watching now, take care, get flying if you can, and if you can't, let's get creative. Bye now.